Greetings. In today's video, I'll talk about how the pagan Oriental world, how their actions in politics and literature and all aspects of life are solely, directed by hatred towards towards Western Christendom. Of course, one might consider my views to be naive. One can, dismiss them as out of hand, but I have arrived at these conclusions after years of study. And of course, it would be okay. There would be many who would scoff at my views. Anyway, why? What? I mean, uh, why is or rather, I should frame it in another way. Uh, the famous historian of the Middle East, Bernard Lewis, he in one of his articles, why Islam hates the West or why Islam hates us. He stated the reasons of about why the causes of Islamic aggression against non-Muslim societies, why Islam has always desired to conquer the West, why their obsessive desire for about conquering Rome is one of the features, and their eschatology, which drives these Orientals into frenzy. Same can be said about the Chinese. When they themselves discovered, especially after the two opium wars, about their own inferiority, and the failure of the Boxer rebellion about their own inferiority, they uh, mightily strove to imitate the West, and now, and by means of immigration, especially to Canada. Same can be said of India, where I come from. It's a fellahin society, irrespective of religious backgrounds, and people here are amoral. I won't say immoral, but amoral. They don't have any moral sensibilities, and without basic moral sensibilities, or not just sensibilities, moral values, a society cannot sustain itself. A normal society cannot function. Normal in terms of what I view to be normative is how the West has evolved. So same can be said about the Arab world, the Middle East, North Africa, Indonesia. This envy which drives these people to, you know, do all sorts of things which they think would be detrimental to European interests. Now, anyone of anyone can argue that, yeah, but today, yes, there might have been envy, there might have been hatred, let's say 2 or 3 centuries ago, but today all such hatreds have ceased. The world is economically connected, but this economic connection, this globalization, this movement of peoples across continents has not in any way diminished this hatred which all Orientals cherish. Whenever they behold any European institution, the first thing that comes to their mind is envy, their own powerlessness, their own helplessness, their own underachievement, not just at an individual level, but at the civilizational scale. And since they cannot outdo the West, all they think is destroy it through immigration, through technology, transfer of technology, immigration, and economic fraud, everything. All these Orientals who put tremendous burden on the NHS in the United Kingdom. It's motivated by the same thing. They're going to take off money, lay all your burdens on them, and leech off. And same thing can be said about immigration. Immigration, yes, there's the desire to practice one's own way of life inside the heart of Christendom. Western Christendom. That's it. That's how mm, these people think. Um, that's how that's the sole motive of immigration. And what I mean, what pains me most is that after allowing immigration, Europeans, Europeans by Europeans I also mean the the, the white peoples, not just I mean the white Americans, Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, that they have allowed these people to bring their religion and propagate it inside the heart of Christendom. So we have to behold the spectacle of paganism being openly practiced, not just mosques, temples, Buddhist religious institutions, ISKCON, Hindu temples, all mosques. Muslims are buying abandoned churches. That's and most importantly, these immigrant communities hailing from the Orient, they don't feel any kind. They don't feel any kind of guilt, unlike Europeans who, after the Second World War, have no, especially in Germany, they have this guilt complex about what they did to the Jewish people in the Second World War, which I don't think is something to be something exclusive, something exclusive fundamental suffering. There are many peoples who have suffered genocide, so exclusivity of the Jewish Holocaust is questionable. But anyway, let's not digress. These people, I mean, they don't feel any gratitude about their host societies. On the contrary, they indulge in crimes, hate crimes, physical assaults, robberies, everything. The African Americans who owe everything, to their European hosts. I mean, their European hosts fought the Civil War on their behalf for their enfranchisement. No, don't say that. Hurl those facts about the Jim Crow laws. Look, segregation is essential to prevent miscegenation of blood, because miscegenation would dilute the civilizational basis of Western Christendom. Yes, miscegenation at very minute scales perhaps might be permissible, but mass scale miscegenation, it's not. I mean, that can immediately lead to the collapse of civilization. What's the difference between South America and North America? With the exception of some countries of South America, like Chile or Paraguay. Why? I mean, North America is more prosperous and South America is not. Why? Because the Spanish and Portuguese conquistadors, they miscegenated with the natives in South America, and apart from that, they brought African slaves. So it's a complete racial mess. And Europeans ought not to miscegenate with fellahin Orientals. The term fellahin, I mean, Egyptian peasant. I mean, Oswald Spengler in his Decline of the West, the second volume of the Decline of the West, he puts some special significance into this term fellahin. People who have become, I mean, the end products of civilization, who have no potentialities except mindless violence, except uh, who have no values, who are simply who simply reproduce and continue to continue the mindless existence generation after generation. That's what fellahin constitutes. And in every civilization of the Orient, we find this fellahin element. So it's unfortunate that um, racial miscegenation is going on. Apart from that, apart from that, the Western Christian values are being diluted because these Orientals now they I mean, after being domiciled in the heart of the West, they I mean they remain unaffected. They remain unaffected. They remain outside the orbit of Western values. They create their own ghettos, and of course, one can live in a ghetto, but their mental world, their intellectual world, that remains the same as it had remained in their own homeland. Their moral and cultural values remain the same. How many immigrants have embraced Christianity after emigrating to the West? And simply converting, simply embracing Christianity for the sake of money, for the sake of getting citizenship, that's another deviousness. I'm speaking about sincere converts who desire to uphold the values of the West. None whatsoever. So here lies the answer. That the Orient is a threat. It's not something harmless. Their philosophies have the capability of capability of they have, their philosophies possess the capability of overturning the West, overturning the political and economic supremacy of the West. And that's very dangerous, extremely dangerous, because intellectual invasion sometimes precedes a physical military invasion. So, if Westerners, if Europeans, if the denizens of Western Christendom, if they become receptive to these subversive ideas, because such had the same thing had taken place in the Middle Ages, or even in the 15th century, they would have been rejected out of hand. One papal bull would have been enough to put these uh, subversives in their own place, I mean, which is in the cesspool, so to speak. So we have to behold the spectacle, this ignominious spectacle of Orientals settled in the West, trying to undermine the West from within. And Oswald Spengler, in one of his essays, long essays, The Hour of Decision, and he made a prediction that it's not improbable that in the West, in the future, uh, class war and race war might coincide, and the protagonists of these two wars might make an alliance to make a clean sweep at the defenses of the West and undermine it completely. And he provides analogies from Roman antiquity about the civil war going on between Marius and Sulla and their respective adherents, their parties, and simultaneously their Mithridates Eupator, the king of Pontus, trying to grab the Roman provinces in the east from the Roman Republic. And even Athens joined them, the tyrant of Athens. Athens at that time was under the tyrant, and he joined his forces. He committed himself to Mithridates. So, this, I mean, so we can clearly say that by that time, when Athens declared itself for Mithridates, an Oriental invader, and about against Rome, that means the racial. It was no longer the Athens of, let's say, Themistocles or Miltiades or Sophocles. The racial base had already changed. So, and about the changing race change in ancient Rome. And the American historian Tenny Frank, he has a fabulous article, extremely informative, about how the demographic change took place in the city of Rome itself. And it was a migration, legal, and legal migration from the Oriental provinces into Italy, and especially Rome itself. And it was only due to the grace of God that the Germanic invaders, when I mean they, their invasions were successful, and their settlements ultimately, especially in the south of France, in Italy, ultimately led to the re-Europeanization of those regions. Let's not forget that Sicily, um, Malta, southern Italy, uh, lay under Saracen rule for many decades. Sicily for 4 or 5 centuries. It was the Normans who Christianized Vikings. who is re-established uh, European rule over Sicily, and especially and also in the island of Malta, which later Holy Emperor Charles V leased it to the Holy Order of the Hospitallers, Knights of the Order of Saint John the Baptist. So all these things are interconnected. So, had the Germanic invaders not been successful, or had they, weakly established themselves, had they been slack, which was the case with the Visigoths in Spain, that their rule was not completely popular, it was undermined from within. As soon as the Arabs landed under Tariq bin Ziyad, he could find he could use the local Jewish population as garrison to garrison the conquered fortresses, conquered towns, and just so the Arab armies went north, while the conquered cities were garrisoned by Jews. So that's something. It was a fifth column. Not just the Jews. I can also fathom that many so-called Roman citizens living under Visigothic rule, they also perhaps might have joined the Arabs. It was only in the north where, at the Battle of Covadonga, where Pelayo and his valiant band of warriors, Gothic warriors, um, inspired by a vision from Holy Mother Mary, successfully stalled and repelled the Arabs. And from there, like mustard seed, like an ever-growing, ever-flourishing mustard seed, the kingdom of Asturias grew and flourished and led the Reconquista. So, had the Visigothic regime been more vigorous, then perhaps the disaster at Guadalete could have been avoided. Yeah, I'm not saying of course, even after the victory of the Arabs at the Battle of Guadalete, when King Roderick died, his queen, I forgot her name, Epigona or Epilona, she married the son of the Arab general, the son of Musa bin Nusair. So that was the chaos. The Visigothic regime was presiding over perhaps a people who had no moral scruples. And that's why, as soon as their army collapsed, or army got defeated, the entire administrative structure collapsed. Even uh, before the Battle of Covadonga, a Catholic priest named Bishop Opas accompanied the Arabs, and this renegade Bishop Opas, was trying to persuade Pelayo to surrender, to capitulate to the Arabs. So that was the state of degradation. This was not the case with Frankish rule in northern France. That's why Charles Martel was able to. Even Charles Martel and later his successors, Pepin III, had to undertake numerous military campaigns to liberate the south of France from Arab rule. Narbonne, Carcassonne, many other cities, the Arab garrisons were expelled. And later, with the accession of Charlemagne and the creation of the Spanish March, his task was to creep Muslims out of the Frankish realm, and gradually the Reconquista slowly but steadily gained ground, and Spain was reconquered, and the cross won a significant victory over the, the crescent. Crescent here represents another just Oriental force. Islam is not something, exceptional. It's just another Oriental force. What was fought, what was the issue that was at stake at the Battle of Marathon, at the Battle of Thermopylae, same thing, same kind of thing, again emerged with the rise of Islam and their aggressions against the West, and his aggressions against the West. So I don't see Marathon and Lepanto in different historical contexts. Same thing. The Xerxes had also desecrated the Greek, all the Greek places of worship after it conquered Athens. And later, here's one of his generals, Mardonius. He also did the same. These Magian peoples, again to use another Spengler's term, these Magian peoples have the same tendency about always proclaiming the supremacy of their deity, even in material terms. So that's how history. That's how um, that's those were the incidents, or rather the wars, which the Occident had to face. Um, it survived, and in the 19th century, it was able to establish as its own supremacy over the Orient. But alas, after the Second World War, uh, Western supremacy over the Orient was temporarily broken. I don't believe that to be a permanent case. It will, it ought to be re-established, but let's pray for that. So with these words, I end today's video.